Nice to meet you. My name is Sairanen. A lot of the decisions that impact our lives and futures are made through international cooperation. And on the other hand, biodiversity decisions have global impacts. This global perspective is what you and I will have a chat about today. Together we will cover 3 issues. First, I will shortly remind you about the global biodiversity decision-making happening under the UN Convention on Biological Diversity and in EU. Secondly, I will tell you why I specifically am talking to you about this. And finally, I will reflect on why global collaboration is crucial and what your role could be. The UN Convention on Biological Diversity is the most comprehensive global environmental agreement on biodiversity. The treaty has been ratified by 196 countries, which means all countries except the US and the Vatican City State. Besides countries, also businesses, the financial sector, researchers, and civil society, including youth and indigenous peoples, take part in the discussions under the Convention. The Convention on Biological Diversity has 3 objectives. 1. To conserve biological diversity. 2. To ensure sustainable use of biodiversity. And 3. To ensure the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the use of genetic resources. To advance these objectives, the parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity come together every 10 years to agree on a strategic plan for nature. The most recent strategic plan lasted from 2010 to 2020 and contained 20 Aichi targets. Targets ranged from eliminating harmful subsidies to halving the rate of loss of natural ecosystems and safeguarding ecosystem services. However, meeting the targets failed, and we are still losing biodiversity at an alarming rate. This threatens human well-being as well as our economies, which are both dependent on nature. Nevertheless, halting biodiversity loss is still possible. Zooming down from the global level to the European Union. Under the European Green Deal, the EU has created a long-term biodiversity strategy with the aim of putting biodiversity on a path to recovery by 2030. The strategy contains specific actions and commitments on 4 topics: protection, restoration, transformative change, and raising global ambition. One of the targets of the EU Biodiversity Strategy is protecting 30% of land and sea in the EU by 2030. This target is also being pushed to the global agenda by EU and numerous other countries. The 30% target is science-based. However, scientists have also called out that the 30 by 30 target is likely just a start, and in the future even more ambition on protection will be needed to protect biodiversity and human well-being and allow for climate change adaptation. But hey, what do you think about the discussions EU's environmental policies are sparking in your countries? And finally, to the reason why I am talking with you today. Drumroll, the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. The Global Youth Biodiversity Network is a network of over 1 million young people from 172 countries. The network is open for all young people wanting to work together for a nature-positive future. Importantly, the Global Youth Biodiversity Network is also the official youth voice in the negotiations under the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. This living planet is our home, and I firmly believe we young people must be part of the decisions shaping our planet's future. Calling for action on streets is needed, but not enough. We must also be seated at the tables where decisions are being made. Alongside youth advocacy, as a network, the Global Youth Biodiversity Network also advocates for countries to include young representatives or youth delegates in their national delegations. In spring 2021, with the backing from the Global Youth Biodiversity Network and the Finnish Youth Council Alliance, we contacted the Environmental Ministry of Finland, suggesting including a youth representative in the Finnish delegation to the Convention on Biological Diversity. Luckily, the chief negotiator at the time, Marina von Weissenberg, is a superwoman fully backing up youth involvement. And so a few weeks after the initial talk with the ministry, I was following my first ever international negotiations. During the negotiations, I keep in close touch with the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, forwarding youth positions to the Finnish negotiators. Regarding the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, young people have highlighted the need to apply principles of intergenerational equity and human rights, secure youth inclusion, and strengthen the focus on transformative education in the framework. What would you highlight as critical issues to be addressed in a global biodiversity strategy? I have now touched on what kind of biodiversity decision-making takes place globally and would like to use these final minutes with you to reflect on why global collaboration on biodiversity is crucial. First, biodiversity loss does not respect country borders. Even though impacts of biodiversity loss are mostly local, the pressures driving nature loss are very much global. For example, it has been estimated that the EU is responsible for 10% of the global deforestation through consumption of products like meat, dairy, animal feeds, and coffee. Therefore, to tackle pressures driving biodiversity loss, local actions must often be complemented with global actions. Second, all nations do not have the same resources or capacities to tackle biodiversity loss. Most rapid loss of biodiversity is taking place in biodiversity hotspots in developing countries, who often lack the financial resources and capacities to tackle the issues alone. Therefore, sharing of knowledge and international funding for biodiversity is necessary. Third, together we can have much larger positive impacts than when acting alone. Creating a common direction through global goals for nature, nations are holding each other accountable for taking action. Don't you agree that it is way easier to join action and get excited when you see others acting around you? I hope we can agree that global collaboration is essential. But what then? How does this affect us all, and how can you and I be part of making the UN vision of living in harmony with nature reality? To answer this question, let's revisit the fact that the latest global strategy for biodiversity failed. One of the reasons for failure was that biodiversity loss has been mainly seen as a struggle to be dealt with within the environmental ministries and maybe environmental organizations. However, the tide is turning. In 2021, under the Convention on Biological Diversity, world leaders signed the Kunming Declaration, acknowledging that the planetary crisis, and I quote, poses an existential threat to our societies, our culture, our prosperity, and our planet. In 2021, the science community has joined forces to showcase the interlinkages between climate change and biodiversity loss, and are calling for joint action for both. In 2021, criminalizing large-scale environmental destruction, or ecocide, was on the table with decision makers. Britain's Get Nature Positive campaign got 143 companies to pledge to be nature positive by 2030, and the UN Human Rights Council recognized the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And the largest ever private funding for biodiversity was made as 9 philanthropists pledged $5 billion for protecting the planet. The momentum to drive change already extends beyond environmental ministries, and now just needs more strength and more voices. The level of change needed extends way beyond protection and restoration to the way we think and the systems we live in, including production and consumption. Applying circular economy to transform the way materials are produced, consumed, and managed is essential for addressing key drivers of biodiversity loss, including land use change, direct exploitation, pollution, and climate change. The level of change needed must take place cross-cuttingly across ministries, but also at dinner tables, at workplaces, and financial institutions. So I would like to leave you with a question. What is your role in building a nature-positive future?